Hey, this is Nick from mycodeteacher.com, and today you'll be learning how to create an iPhone application that can send emails from within the application. Now this is in-application emailing, which means you're giving the user or yourself the ability to send an email without leaving the application and going into the iPhone's mailing application. It's very convenient because when people are using your application, they don't want to leave the application to send an email, say a support email, or if your application has email functionality, so it's a very useful feature to provide your users with. Uh, so we'll start off by opening Xcode and creating a new project, file, not new file, file, new project, and we'll create a view-based application. You can call it whatever you want for this. I'll call it Mail Composer and save it to my desktop. You're welcome to save it wherever you want. Now let me just resize some things here, make my editor full screen, and open up some folders. I'm opening up classes, resources, and frameworks. The first thing we're going to want to do is just lay out a quick interface. So let's open the Mail Composer View Controller nib file. You want your View Controller nib file, not your main window, because we're using the built-in view that they provide. So you have your view here, and we'll have to go to Window, Tools, Library, and bring our library over. So you have all your objects here. We're just going to do one thing. We're just going to drag out a button into our view, resize it, double click, and call it Send Email. I'm then going to make the font a little bigger by holding Shift, Apple, and then the plus key. Alternatively, opening up the font dialog and changing your font like this. Not important. So we have our button. Now we're going to go into the View Controller files. These are the only two files we'll be working in for this whole program. The first thing we're going to do is going to create an action that will be connected to our button. So above your @end line, add an IB action, and we'll call it Send Email. You can watch plenty of tutorials to learn about IB actions and just everything really that I'm doing here. You can learn from other tutorials except for the emailing part, so I'm not really going to go in depth about IB actions and interface build and everything. But all we're going to do now, once that's saved, is go back into our view, go to Files Owner, which is, if you check the Info tab, the Mail Composer View Controller, and just connect the Send Email action to the button's touch up inside method. So when you release the button, it'll call this method. Let's then take our method, put it into our viewcontroller.m above all the commented code, and you're set with that. Next thing we have to do, we have to set up for emailing. Whatever file you're doing emailing in, this is the setup that you have to do to get it to work. First, we have to add the messaging framework. So go down to your Frameworks tab on the left here, click and right-click any of the frameworks. Click Reveal in Finder. This will take you to the window that has all your frameworks. What you're looking for now is messageui.framework. So take that and drag it into Xcode. This dialog will pop up, and you want to recursively create groups for any edit folders, and do not check this box. And then you'll add. It should be the default settings. If it's not, change it to what mine was. You now have the Message UI framework. Then whichever class you plan on emailing from, in my case the View Controller, you're going to have to import the Message UI framework, just like that. Import Message UI / MessageUI.h. That'll import all the headers associated with in-application emailing. The last thing you need to do is just set your delegate properties. In this case, MF Mail Composer. Here, let's just save real quick. Alright, MF Mail Composer View Controller Delegate and UI Navigation Controller Delegate. I'll explain later why I needed to put those, but for right now, just put this in your code. Now the next thing we do, before we do any coding whatsoever further than this, we're going to go look in the documentation and see what emailing looks like. So I'll type in MF Mail Compose View Controller. This is the method that handles emailing. If you didn't know that, you could go into the framework, go into the headers, and you'll see MF Mail Compose View Controller is really one of the only headers available for emailing. So we'll type that in the documentation and see what's available. As you can see, it explains all about how this is used for sending email. And there's a couple things you can do down here. There's a Boolean property that tells you whether you can send mail or not. You should always check this before sending mail, because if a device is running software before the 3.0 software, it can't send mail, and other complications that might prevent the application being able to send mail. So first you got to check can send mail. I'll go into this later. Other things you could do, you could set the subject, the two recipients, other recipients, the message body, and attachment, and set the delegate. We'll be doing most of these things in this tutorial. What I want you to take a look at first is the mail compose delegate. This is the reason we put mf mail compose view controller delegate here, because the delegate, if you take a look, has this method mail compose controller did finish with result. This will be called after your email is sent and tell you whether there's success or failure. So we want to copy and paste that method into our mail compose view controller.m. Since the delegate was declared in here, you must have the delegate method in here for it to be called. So now that we have that set, we can begin emailing. We can begin creating the email. Make sure you delete that semicolon that I forgot to delete before. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is we're going to create a new object of mail compose view controller. So we'll call mf mail compose view controller, create an object. We'll call it mail composer. And then you have to allocate it and initialize it. After that, you have to set the delegate. You don't have to do it right yet, but you have to do it eventually. And unlike most other things where you do something.delegate, you can go see another tutorial about an in-depth explanation of delegates. This one's different. As you can see in the documentation, it's specifically mail compose delegate. There we go. Mail compose delegate you need to set. So we'll set the mail compose delegate, and we'll set it to self because this is the delegate. We declared here that this is the delegate. Now we're telling the actual mail composer that this is the delegate. Call this method down here after you've sent the message. Once you've initialized the object, check if you can send mail. So if mf mail compose view controller can send mail, checks if it can send mail. The reason I did that is because can send mail is a class method, not an instance method. So you have to call it from the class, not the actual instance or object you declared. So the actual class is calling can send mail. If this returns yes, it'll go into this code here where you can send mail. Now that you know you can send mail, let's explore what various things you can set with the mail. So the first thing we'll do is set the subject of the email. So it's very simple. Open a bracket and call mail composer, then the method, as shown by the documentation, is set subject. Remember, documentation is your friend. You can find anything you want there. So you set the subject to an NS string. In this case, we'll say sending an email from the iPhone will be our subject. Close the bracket and add a semicolon. Now your subject is set. After that, you can set the message body. So you can set the text. Mail composer set message body is also a method in the documentation. And we'll say this is the text that is sent in my email from the iPhone. And now it asks you for another parameter, is HTML. If you're sending HTML code to display fancy things in your email, you put yes, but no, we're not in this case. No, we're just sending plain text. If you're sending plain text, set it to no. If you don't know what it does, just set it to no and don't worry about it. At this point, we have a subject sent and a message body. Let's display the actual mail composer to the user. So after you've set that, you're going to display the mail controller in the view controller. You do that like this. Self, which is the view controller, present model view controller, mail composer, and we'll animate it. Yes. What this is telling the view controller to do is to present this other view controller, which is the mf mail compose view controller, present it, and by animated, you could set the animation that it does, and the default is just kind of shoot in from the bottom. That's what we'll leave it as. So let's build the project and make sure we haven't made any mistakes here. And you see succeeded, where it's successful. Alright, now that we're successful, before we go and run the project real quick, just jump into Interface Builder and make sure you save, or else your button might not show up. Simple little thing like that could throw you off for a little bit. You won't know what's going on. And now build and run your project. I'm running Simulator 3.0 debugging. You see we have our view with our send email button. When I click it, it'll call the send email method and present us with the emailing interface. That was prevent model view controller. You see the subject is sending an email from the iPhone like we set, and this is the text that's sent from my email from the iPhone. The user can then set a recipient. We'll say just someone at somewhere.com, and then they can send it. However, you notice if we click send, it doesn't go away. Just so you know beforehand, the simulator doesn't actually send email. It just presents the interface on the actual device. It sends the email. But after we click send, nothing happens. It doesn't, the image, the view controller doesn't go anywhere. It just kind of stays there. So let's handle that now. In our mail compose controller delegate, this will be notified when the message is either sent successfully, when the message failed to send. Pretty much when you're done with the view, this is called. So what we got to do in this view is dismiss the view controller. And that method is a call to self view controller, dismiss model view controller animated. Yes, we'll say yes, we want it animated. So whatever the current model view controller is, when we presented the mail composer that made this the current one, it'll now dismiss it. So let's run the project again real quick. You see we could bring our interface in, and in this case I'll hit cancel, bring our interface out. This method is called when you hit cancel. Alright, next thing you might want to do is you might want to check if the sent message was successful or if it failed. So you can do that like this. You'll see this thing here. Did finish with result, mf mail compose result, and then the result. So we can check that result by saying if result equals, and there's a number of things we can check provided in the documentation. One is mf mail compose result failed. This would be if the message failed. So we can see that, and if the message failed, we can, let's say, present an alert. I'll teach you how to do that real quick. UI alert view, create an alert object. This is not the point of the tutorial, so I'll go through it real quick. Allocate it, initialize it with the title message failed to send. The delegate will be self, the cancel button will be OK, and the other button titles will be nil. You can find other tutorials on the internet teaching you how to work with UI alert views. They're pretty simple. We'll show it and then release it. And that'll pop up if the mail failed to send. However, in the simulator, the mail's never going to fail to send, so just to show you that this works, I'll change it to the result canceled. So now this will be called when we click cancel. So I'll display the interface and hit cancel, and you see message failed to send. Alright, so now you know if you just change that back to failed, you know that that's going to work when the message fails to send. There's also message compose result sent and saved are two other things you can check for in the exact same style as this. Alright, so that's pretty much how to send email. The user is presented with the interface. They can input who they want to send to, and then they can send it. Let's take this one step further, and let's say this is a support button in your application. The support button's hit, and the interface pops up with an email already addressed to your company where they can then type in the problem. Let's say you want to do that. So let's automatically set the to recipient, the recipient that will receive the email. We do that like this. Mail composer set to recipients. Then you have to pass in an NS array of all the recipients. A tutorial was just posted to my code teacher about dealing with NS mutable arrays and whatnot. But this would be the syntax you would use here. NS array with objects, and then list all your objects. We'll do, like I said before, someone at somewhere.com, and then always end your arrays with common nil, or else they will not be accepted as arrays. It's always what you have to do. You can go watch other tutorials on NS mutable and NS array arrays. So that should automatically set the to recipients. Let's run our code real quick in the simulator and check. When we click send email, the to recipient message field is already filled out. We can still type other addresses into it. The user can delete that, but this is useful for, let's say, a support email or a feedback email button in your application. Okay, the last thing I'm going to teach you how to do is send an attachment. In this case, we're going to be sending a picture attachment. See here, add attachment data is a method. So now I'll take this picture I have here. It's the background I have in my computer in a smaller resolution file. And I'm going to take that and drag it into my project Mail Composer. I'm then going to go into my project and drag the picture into Resources. Be presented with the same dialog as before, same settings, and click Add. Now we have the image in our project. Now let's take a look at the method here. Add attachment. So here's the method. We'll put it in here underneath our set message body. Mail Composer, set attachment. Oh, what was that method? Add attachment, sorry. Add attachment, and you have to pass in NS data, an NS string, the MIME type, and a file name. So let's go take a look at the MIME type. You have to go to this website here, iana.org, and you have to look for a registered media type for your email. All attachments must have a registered media type for it to send successfully. In this case, we're sending an image, so we'll click Image. You see here we have a large list of images formats to choose from. We're going to be using JPEG. We're going to send a JPEG image. So go back in the documentation, you'll see you have to list it as, let's say for a JPEG, they give you an example right here, image/JPEG. Really what it is, it's just whatever you clicked on here / whatever you want inside. So you could do audio/AC3 if you were sending an AC3 file. In our case, image/JPEG. So let's go back to our project, and let's put that as the MIME type. We'll start with that. Image/JPEG. So we're passing that in as a string to our MIME type. And the file name, we're going to call it attachment.jpg. That'll be our file name. Last thing we have to do is pass in the NS data for the attachment. This is how we're going to do that. First, you're going to have to create a UI image object. We'll call it photo. And then call the method UI image named, and then you have to pass in the name of an image in your project. In our case, mtc_bg.png. You just put in the name of whatever your file is. I'm using a PNG. You could use JPEGs, BMPs, whatever. Just put in the correct image name for that method. Now that you have the photo, you have to get the data. You can't just pass in the photo like this. Photo, that doesn't work. You have to pass in the data of the photo. So how we're going to do that, we're going to create an NSData object. NSData, we'll call it photo data, and that will equal this method here, UI image JPEG representation, pass in an image object, which we just created, photo, and the compression quality. This is a value between 0 and 1, 1 being the highest quality, 0 being pretty low quality. So we want the best quality, so we'll put 1. This method, UI image JPEG representation, is used to get the data from a JPEG image. Used to get the data in JPEG encoding from a UI image. You can also get the data in PNG encoding by changing JPEG to PNG in all caps. And then you have to change your MIME type to image/PNG. But we're sending JPEG data, so we're going JPEG. This is also a good way of converting a PNG, as you saw, to a JPEG and then emailing it out of the application. Okay, now that we have our NSData photo data, we'll put that in as the attachment data, photo data. And now we could build our project. You see it's successful, and we'll run it. Now when we click Send Email, it'll encode our image into data and attach it to the email, as you see right here. It has our to field, our subject, and our message body text. The user can then send that email, views dismissed. The email will be sent by the application's mail program, but you will not leave the application. So that's really it. That's really everything you can do. You can also set the CC recipients and BCC recipients if need be. But that's really all Mail Composer does for you, and it's pretty simple to use it. You can see very short code. You can download this project from mycodeteacher.com and use the code in your own projects. I just like to point out a couple things just to end this. You see here I called self present model view controller. Let's say you were emailing from a custom class you created that's not a UI view controller. This method, present model view controller and dismiss model view controller, are only available in a view controller. So if you're calling this from another file that's not a view controller, you're going to have to call this method in a view controller. So create an object of your view controller in whatever file you're sending mail from, and then call that here instead of self. Whatever program is displaying, whatever class is displaying the mail composer, make sure you have these two calls right here. UI Navigation Controller Delegate handles the transition of the view controller flying in, and the message delegate controls this method right here, where you can check if the message was successful or a failure. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed, and watch more tutorials. Good luck.